World leaders have been acknowledging the apparent beginning of the end of Colonel Gaddafi's rule. The European Union said it's making plans for a Libya without Mr Gaddafi. NATO confirmed that its mission to protect civilians in Libya continues. Its Secretary-General, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, made the statement.
The Gaddafi regime is clearly crumbling. The sooner Gaddafi realizes that he cannot win the battle against his own people, the better, so that the Libyan people can be spared further bloodshed and suffering. The Libyan people have suffered tremendously under Gaddafi's rule for over 4 decades. Now they have a chance for a new beginning.
Well, that was NATO's Secretary-General. In the past hour or so, the British Prime Minister David Cameron said Colonel Gaddafi's regime is falling apart and in full retreat, and that British diplomats would move from the eastern city of Benghazi to Tripoli as soon as it was safe to do so. Mr Cameron also praised the role played by UK and international forces in the Libyan uprising.
6 months ago, this country took the difficult decision to commit our military to support the people of Libya. I said at the time that the action was necessary, legal and right, and I believe that even more strongly today. It was necessary because Gaddafi was going to slaughter his own people, and that massacre of innocent people was prevented. It was legal because we secured a resolution from the United Nations, and we have been acting in accordance with that resolution ever since. And it was right because the Libyan people deserve to shape their own future, just as the people of Egypt and Tunisia are now doing.
David Cameron there. Well, other international leaders have been pressing the Libyan leader to step aside too. The French President Nicolas Sarkozy said that the President of the Republic urges Colonel Gaddafi to spare his people pointless suffering by renouncing without delay what little powers he retains.
Well, the American President Barack Obama has said that Gaddafi needs to acknowledge the reality that he no longer controls Libya. He needs to relinquish power once and for all.
Well, let's get more reaction from Washington. We'll go live now to our correspondent, David Willis. David, it was an interesting turn of events earlier in the day. We heard President Obama say he wouldn't comment, then about an hour or so later, he did comment. Have we had a firm message now that he believes Mr Gaddafi's time is over?
Well, we have, Naga. They've been cautious, the White House. President Obama is actually on vacation. He's in Martha's Vineyard at the moment. But nonetheless, the White House is at pains to point out that he's been meeting with members of his National Security Council. The statement that you referred to there from President Obama said that the momentum against the Gaddafi regime has reached a tipping point. In his words, Tripoli is slipping from the grasp of a tyrant, and President Obama called on Colonel Gaddafi to recognize that his rule had come to an end and to relinquish power once and for all.
It's interesting, David, isn't it, that we've seen the EU say it is making plans for a Libya without Gaddafi. NATO has said it's still going to be involved in the country. I imagine this is also going to be a similar vein when we do hear more from President Obama.
I think so, Naga, very much. The White House is also at pains to point out that America is working with the Transitional National Council, and in the statement, President Obama called for a just and inclusive future for the people of Libya. Very interesting, significant choice of words, I think. He also said that a season of conflict must lead to one of peace. All eyes, of course, now on what happens next in Libya, that this should be a smooth transition. The last thing that Western leaders want is some sort of tribal bloodbath.
What would this do, David, for President Obama's ratings there, his popularity? It's been at a fairly dismal level so far. Is this a boost, perhaps?
Well, you know, it's very interesting because there's already been criticism. Senator John McCain, who was a firm advocate of U.S. intervention in Libya, has criticized the president for not doing enough and not deploying troops on the ground. He said that all of this could have been achieved earlier had America acted more decisively. That said, Naga, I have to say that there is one thing that's on the mind of Americans and that will focus their mind in the run-up to next year's election, and that is not events overseas, it's events here at home, namely the economy.
An interesting view from Washington, David. What next? Do we see President Obama and international leaders meet together to come out with one firm voice?
I think we may well do, actually. Certainly he'll be in contact, I'd imagine, with David Cameron, if he's not been already. And I think that there will be an attempt to get that sort of, consensus, as it were. But at the moment, the White House being very careful to basically find out the way the chips lie, what happens on the ground, and reserving judgment, reserving full comment until they see how it plays out there in Libya.
No doubt. Internationally, everyone keeping a very close eye on events. David, thanks very much for bringing us up to date with the view from Washington.
Well, we'll be back in Tripoli in a moment or two. Business time now, and Juliette Foster is here. And what impact is all of this having on the markets and also oil prices?
Right, in terms of oil prices, really the numbers speaking for themselves. But interestingly enough, what actually happened initially was that we actually saw London Brent crude falling by around 3%, coming at $106.05 a barrel. You can see the slight lessening of that gap, down just over 1%. Likewise, light crude also trading off, but trading a little bit positive, perhaps a sign, perhaps, that maybe, just maybe, there's an element of the reality check. Because, yes, we saw the downturn, very positive for prices, but the underlying fundamentals of the economy have not gone away. We are still conducting trade against a backdrop of slow economic growth and really concerns about how quickly we can actually turn the situation around in terms of restoring some positivity to the markets. Don't forget, of course, the other element in this is that European sovereign debt crisis. Well, Saket Vemprala is an oil and gas analyst at Business Monitor International, and he now joins me. Very good day to you. Let's look at the possibility of what can happen if there is a peace that is quickly established in Libya. How long will it take for those oil fields to get back to their full capacity?
Well, that's the key question. At the moment, there's a great degree of uncertainty as to precisely how much damage the oil infrastructure in Libya has withstood. We know that the Sirte and Mesla oil fields in the southeast of the country were hit by Gaddafi's forces back in April. They also managed to hit an oil export pipeline to Tobruk along the Mediterranean coast. And many of the facilities along the coastline, especially around Ras Lanuf, have been badly hit as well. It is possible that the rebels may be able to start exporting oil within a matter of 6 to 12 months, but full capacity could be at least a year or two away.
And let's pursue this a little bit further, because there is one school of thought that says that whatever Libya produces is going to be largely absorbed by domestic rather than export needs. So couldn't that have a negative impact perhaps on the price itself?
It could very well. Many of Libya's refineries are not running at full capacity, if not running at all. Throughout much of the civil war, the Gulf state of Qatar helped to supply refined fuels to the rebels, and it's likely that they'll continue to do so as they've emerged as perhaps the closest ally of the rebels in the Arab world. And it's also worth bearing in mind that the rebels could stand to gain a lot of money by exporting their crude oil rather than consuming it domestically. And so it is likely that we could see them choosing to prioritize crude exports and then satisfying domestic refined fuels demand through the assistance from their allied countries.
Right, but the real test, of course, is what's going to happen after Colonel Gaddafi, because there is concern about the divisions amongst the rebel ranks. And again, couldn't that perhaps hamper oil supplies and exports and potentially push up the price of crude if they can't actually forge a consensus amongst themselves?
There's no question that security is a major concern here. They'll have to demonstrate that they have been able to maintain security across all the oil fields and facilities. Before the events of the last day or so, we heard the rebels say that they were establishing an oil security force, and so this is going to be key, because they're going to have to bring back foreign workers to help return production to full steam, and so security, as you pointed out, is a key factor to watch.
Okay, Saket Vemprala, we'll leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us there with your assessment of the Libyan oil situation. More updates later.
Juliette, looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Well, with us here now is Saad Jabbar, a political commentator on the Middle East and North Africa, as well as a former lawyer for the Libyan government. Thank you so much for coming in. It has been an extraordinary last 24 hours. Do you anticipate there is going to be more resistance?
I think Gaddafi will resist in order to turn his, the secrecy of his whereabouts into a bargaining chip, especially in the light that 2 of his sons were detained. So now I could envisage, or could see that Russia, China, Algeria, the neighboring country, the regime which supported Gaddafi in his own intransigence, I could see them moving very quickly, trying to convince him to turn yet his own position into negotiating one for an exit or for safe
And
passage
his
for him.
position being in terms of any sort of bargaining chips is what?
Well, we don't know where he is. He still have some forces, diehards, who might turn into a guerrilla force of sleeping cells. Don't rule that out. He's lost politically. He will never gain that power. He lost his influence. He lost his communication systems. That's why the rebels will do better in attacking his own compound in Al-Aziziyah, because that's where he runs the radio station and TV station. That's where he runs some other nerve center of communications and orders and so on.
Well, Sajaba, thanks very much. More from you in the coming minutes. Just a quick reminder of the main news this hour from Libya. The battle for control of Tripoli is still going on after rebel forces entered the heart of the city overnight.
Now, one of our correspondents did get caught up in some of the fighting. He says there appears to be several front lines. We will keep you up to date on BBC News.